That sound means that we're taking a look at a Hellcat. This is a 2025 Dodge Durango Hellcat. Really the only Hellcat left for 2025. It has received a stay of execution for one more year. So if you're looking for 710 horsepower in a 3-row SUV that will tow nearly 9,000 pounds and seat people relatively comfortably in the 3rd row, you have an option in the Durango Hellcat. And after this year, if you want this much power, this much performance in a 3-row SUV, you have a few EVs you can check out and a very limited number of even more expensive gasoline SUVs. Bearing in mind, this is basically a $100,000 Dodge. Today I'm out here in Washington with Nick behind the camera. Nick, what do you think of the look of the Hellcat? And do you think this is worth that $97,000 starting price?
Yeah, that's a tough question because it does look relatively similar to the base trims that are nowhere near the $100,000 price point, but Dodge makes it a good effort to put things on it like the Hellcat logo on the front grille. You have the Hellcat badge on the side, these matte black wheels, absolutely massive 6-piston brakes.
Yep. And the wheels, those are kind of cool, but they are pretty similar to the regular Durango SRT, the one with the 6.4-liter Hemi under the hood. 295/45 are 20 tires here. These are Pirelli Scorpion Zero tires. So these are not the grippiest tire, but that's of course because it's an SUV. And Dodge still gives you a spare tire available, and you can get all-season tires as well. So if you want this much power, but you still want to be able to take your Durango to the ski resort, you can do that as well. I am surprised that they didn't flare out the fenders a little bit and give us something like 325s in the back. I think that kind of addition would have really made this look even more aggressive. Up on the roof, of course, no roof rails up there. And around the back, we get the majority of this design shared with the base Durango that has the 3.6-liter V6 under the hood. Obviously, that's not going to have these enormous exhaust tips back there, but the general rear end design is actually exactly the same as the regular SRT, again, the 392, which, full disclosure, I actually have one of those at home, so I have a Durango. It's the one that's not this crazy, though, because for me, this level of crazy was just a tiny bit too much, but if you want to dial your Durango all the way up to 11, it is still an option. We started out this video with the Hellcat engine running because this is all about the sound, but what about the power?
Yeah, we're looking at that 710 horsepower and 645 pound-feet of torque. Now this is paired to an 8-speed automatic transmission, and it gets it from 0 to 60 in the low 3-second mark, which is insane because this thing weighs
5,700-ish pounds, somewhere around there?
Or over 6,000 pounds with me and Alex inside of it. Now, the pavement has dried out a little bit, so we are going to get on just a tad bit once we get into the driver's seat. But that low 3-second mark is absolutely astonishing for how large this vehicle is. But that big old supercharged Hemi under the hood, you have all-wheel drive, those big, fat, meaty tires. It all plays a part into making this big, hefty machine go that quick. And it's a beautiful looking engine as well. You got those orange valve covers there. You have that intercooled supercharger up top. That
massive air intakes.
Massive.
That's huge.
I mean, imagine the amount of air that has to go through this vehicle. That's just, oh, it's a beautiful sight. It's actually a nice looking engine, which is rare.
Yeah, and what's cool about the all-wheel drive system in this vehicle is that it has a adjustable torque split. So of course it has the ZF 8-speed automatic transmission, the heaviest, dutiest version of that 8-speed auto. And then it has an active torque split system, so it can send 50% of the power to the front, 50% to the rear, or it can have almost an entire rear power bias if you want to. Now there is no true rear-wheel drive mode, so it's always going to be sending some power to the front wheels. You know, fuel economy, let's just be honest, the less we say about that, the better. Now with the hood closed, you can see that this model has the optional black graphic on the hood, which I actually think looks pretty good with this silver paint job. The vents on the hood, these are functional, but it's worth noting that you get the same hood and the same look basically up front in a number of other Durangos, including Durangos with the 5.7-liter V8. I have to admit, I was a little bit sad about that when they refreshed the Durango and more models got that more aggressive GT-like front end or SRT-like front end, because you know, it's a little bit less special, I have to admit. Now let's check out the seats. I'm a little bit biased, of course, because I have a Durango at home and I find the seats to be pretty comfortable. How do you fit up there in the driver's seat?
Let me get adjusted here. It's a nice experience. You know, there's not a ton of bolster, which you would expect to have a lot of bolster in a 700 horsepower vehicle, but there's enough to hold you in place, but it's not obnoxious to where if you are a larger person, it's not going to be uncomfortable. It's not going to be poking into your sides or your legs. It is a nice, comfortable seat, and we do have this nice plush leather with this thick stitching. We have suede found here on the steering wheel, the headliner. It's a very premium feeling interior, and you also have all this forged carbon fiber as well as that red key that means business. So you have a lot of premium materials in here, different colored stitching, different colored leathers, and it's really, I mean, this looks like a $100,000 interior. That might be controversial, but
yeah, I mean, I would, you know, as a Durango owner, I will say some things definitely feel $100,000. This is my personal vibe here, but some things feel $100,000. You know, but the blend of plastics we find in here, I really wish that Dodge had spent more time with the lower plastics on the door, because this portion of the door, this is a hard plastic with kind of a naugahyde-like texture. Lower portion of the door, that's all hard plastic. Upper section of the door, this is stitched leather. We also get the leather dashboard up here. The dashboard, I think, looks really great with the contrasting stitching. Take a look more at that in a bit. And I do like the seats on longer road trips. The seats are really supportive. But, you know, it comes across to me personally as high-end options added to a discount interior. Let's have you hop in the back seat.
Okay.
Because this is one of the areas where, you know, I actually would have liked to see some improvements over time in the Durango. Keep in mind, I mean, this is a vehicle that's getting pretty old, and it's at the end of its road here now. But the second row does not slide forward and backward. And that means that we have a little bit less ability as far as getting into that third row or allocating space between the third row and the second row, etc. This model has a pretty decent amount of headroom, though. That's always been one big advantage of the Durango. So check out how much room you got there.
yeah, you know, oh, you got plenty of headroom for sure. One thing I want to point out real quick, because I just mentioned how this looks like a $100,000 interior. The feeling is a whole different thing, because right here, the center console, it feels like if I hit this hard enough, it'd just fall out. And that's
a little bit of vibration going on there.
A little bit, and that's just, I don't know if it's this has also been used and abused. It is a press car.
Yep, we have the sort of minivan style air conditioning controls right up there in the ceiling.
Vents up top, second and third row, lights for each row, and your own HVAC controls up here in the ceiling of the second row.
Yeah, let's get back there in the third row, because that actually, I think, is one of the decent advantages to the Durango, is that as old as this is, yeah, it has kind of an old school style.
Is that the best way to get in?
Old school style second row seat. This is the two-stage old school style seat. So you pull that up, and that's how you get back there
so I looked
into
like
the
a
third
fool
row.
doing that, didn't I?
But you know, you can do either way. Depends on whether or not you want to pull on that extra line there. Reasonable amount of headroom back there in the third row. That's the big advantage, really.
I'm sitting perfectly straight up, and usually the third row, the headroom is where the issue lies, not the legroom, the headroom. As I have a
legroom is not great because that second row doesn't move. You know, good example
but it's not
here.
bad. I mean,
yeah, but the seat bottom cushion's not all the way slammed on the ground.
No, that is nice too. You don't have your knees in your chest if you're a taller person, but I mean, plenty of room back here. I like it, and access to the center console from a push button.
Yep, the double opening center console. I think that's why it's a little bit wobbly sometimes feeling, because it has hinges on both sides. It opens from both sides there. This particular second row, though, this old school nature, of course, means you can't leave child seats latch anchored into place. That's definitely a bummer, and it just means that it's a more complicated operation to get back there into the third row. Now, the reason it's a two-person third row, of course, is because we have these really wide haunches in the rear, because they have to package those 295 width tires and, of course, the fully independent rear-wheel drive suspension in the rear, and all that does take up some space.
Yeah, it's a very dark feeling interior, as well as you have this black Alcantara or suede headliner with the black plastic, darker leather. It's a very dark feeling in that third row. Although you do have air vents, that makes it just a little bit more usable in terms of making sure it doesn't feel claustrophobic. You have these nice wide windows here behind that C-pillar.
Yeah, there are some classic aspects that I like. These windows are pretty big in the back, so as far as third row light and third row feel back there, you do get that extra glass. I actually have to say I really like this sort of, how do we describe this, sort of chocolate Bordeaux, maybe something along those lines. It's not brown, it's not red, it's somewhere between those brown and red tones for the interior. It definitely is more discreet, I would say, than the brighter red interior that we find in some other models out there, including other versions of the Durango.
Yeah, it's like a chocolatey red.
Now, of course, the downside to packaging several different V8s under the hood, because the Durango has been available not just with one V8, not just with two V8s, but 3 different V8s up to 6.4 liters or this supercharged 6.2. That space has to come from somewhere. And for a vehicle this size, that somewhere really is this cargo area in the back. So You know, the cargo area is about the same size as a regular Highlander, not a Grand Highlander, but you can fit two 22-inch roller bags, you know, sort of stacked back there, and the hatch will close.
Now, will it close with it upright? I don't think it will.
I'm going to go with no. That's my guess. Now, if you were to guess where the button for the closing of this would be, where would you think it would be?
Well, usually up here on the liftgate, that's where the easiest spot is, but no, it's not.
Yep, and I appreciate this thought process once it's explained to you.
Yeah.
So here's the thought process. Let me know if the explanation helps you at all, or if you still think it's crazy. They put it here like they do in the minivans because for kids or shorter people, they can't reach up there, but your kid can actually reach over there and press that button. But even after owning Durangos, I find myself in my own vehicle trying to stab a button that doesn't exist.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that issue. I would like both. Why not have both? Have a button up there and a button down here.
Cost obviously is the answer for the not having both.
It's $100,000. Give me a button.
In the back of the Durango, you'll find one or two reasons to get this over most of the competition. The first one is the 8,700 pounds of towing capability. And under here, the other reason is that you can actually get a spare tire in the back of the Durango. Now, this particular model does not have that option. And you should know that if you get the Hellcat or the 392 version of the Durango, it is a compact spare tire, not a full-size spare tire. But as I discovered in my own Durango, that's because they were concerned about departure angles for off-roading. Yes, in a 710 horsepower Durango for some reason. So you can actually fit a full-size spare tire in the spare tire well. They just don't want to give you one from the factory. So Nick, let's take a look around the interior and I'll point out the things that I like about the interior and let's see how you feel about them and sort of the things that I'm not the biggest fan of after having lived with it for a while. I guess the thing for a lot of folks to know is that even though this has been around for a bit, Dodge a few years ago gave the interior a bit of a refresh, and it was more thorough than I had expected. The big change was the new touchscreen infotainment system here in the dashboard and some additional controls down here. So they decided not to delete buttons, even though this system does have a lot of touch controls in it. For instance, the entire climate control system, that's a little slow there, but you can actually touch control this. This is running Uconnect 5, but I don't know if it's the same processor and same processor speed that we find in other Uconnect 5 systems, because in here it does seem just a little bit slower than in the Wagoneer. But we now have physical buttons down here for things like seat ventilation, seat heating, the steering wheel heater, etc. And not all these buttons were physical previously. A lot of times they were just up there in the system. We also have some direct access buttons to launch control, of course, because you know you need a family vehicle with latch anchors everywhere for launching the kids. And then we have an SRT button that takes you over to the drive mode page where we have a ton of different ways to configure the system. You know, you can adjust whether the paddles are working in each of its various drive mode, the suspension, steering, etc. So that's kind of cool. The dashboard general style I kind of like, but that instrument cluster, that is the part that seems, you know, really old school to me as far as its design. It just doesn't seem overly modern.
Yeah, you know, it doesn't bother me too much. I'm sitting here looking at it, thinking, do I like it? Do I hate it? You know, it'd be nice to have a fully digital dash for $100,000. I actually don't mind physical gauges for your mile per hour or your tachometer. I don't mind that kind of stuff. It gives you kind of the best of both worlds, because you do have an LCD screen in the middle that you do have a lot of information that you can display on there, and it's interchangeable. So it gives you, like I said, the best of both worlds. If you like analog gauges, you got those. So it's like, yes, I think a digital dash probably would be a little more fitting for the price point, but here we are. And this is still updated, like you mentioned, so you do get a little bit of newer tech, but I don't know, maybe that is a little bit of a miss by Dodge.
Yeah, for me, I think maybe it's because it's exactly the same format, although in the SRTs we do get a slightly different look. So if I lean the camera over here, you know, instead of a speedometer digitally here, we get a tachometer, and instead of an analog tachometer that we find in the rest of the lineup, that's a speedometer over there. But the key gauge components are basically the same as they have been in the entire run of this Durango. So my mom's 12-year-old Grand Cherokee has that exact same format display. 2025, same format display. My two Durangos all had that same format display. But I like the rest of the changes in the dashboard. I also really like the fact that, as we see in a lot of Chrysler, Dodge, Ram vehicles, etc., we have lots of USB ports. So all 4 of these ports will interface with the system. You can plug your smartphone into any of those, and Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. You can also wirelessly CarPlay if you want to. Pretty big wireless charging mat there. Quirky things. 12-volt power port, that's over here on the side, in the passenger side footwell.
That's a little strange.
But we do finally have an integrated trailer brake controller there under the power button.
That is nice to tow that almost 9,000 pounds. It's definitely needed. Definitely needed for that type of weight.
And as I said before, you know, decent amount of hard plastics lower in the dashboard. So this is all hard plastic lower in the dash, including around this center console section. So stitched leather here, and then we get the hard plastics below that. The bin style glove compartment, little on the small side. You know, you're not going to be able to fit any tablet computers in there that are large by any stretch. But they have improved the audio system, so we now have a Harman Kardon audio system. I definitely like that a lot more than the Beats audio system that we used to find in the Durango. Over here we have window switches and door switches that I know some people have complained about. They're like, ooh, those are the same as in a Dodge Dart. That's terrible from way back when. But you know, they're also Mercedes window switches because that is the fun thing about this generation of Durango is that there is a lot of Mercedes going on here, including that powered tilt telescopic steering column.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's why that steering wheel knob there, that is basically the same as every Mercedes from the same generation.
Yeah, you're right.
As when this was originally designed.
Oh, I never noticed that.
They have tweaked a few things though. I mean, the steering wheel, that's obviously not Mercedes anymore. Yeah. That is definitely very, very Dodge Ram. Really noticeable because we have the controls on the back of the steering wheel. So you'll find volume up and down and track up and down on the back, which is why we have these sort of baby paddle shifters here. They're not a full length paddle. They're relatively short because we have those controls on the back of the steering wheel and then lots of buttons on the front. So, you know, we have adaptive cruise control and then regular cruise control, just in case you wanted to switch modes. And then over there we have the controls for that multifunction LCD cluster, voice command button, etc. Are you a fan of the voice buttons on the back of the wheel?
The voice button.
I mean volume up, volume and track.
In Dodge products, not so much. I mean, it's nice to have as an option, but I'd rather just reach over and turn the dial. I don't necessarily find that to be super necessary for me, at least. Track forward and back, yes, for sure. I like having that near the steering wheel.
But what about the front versus the back of the wheel?
Oh, I definitely want them by my thumb because it's just a small movement, and then you're kind of searching around. You think it's a paddle shifter, you think it's a volume up and down. I'd rather just have them right here, over on the left or right side, which one it is. I mean, I'd rather have it on the front of the wheel for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I find myself falling into I see it as normal because oddly enough, 25 years ago, I bought my first car with the buttons on the back of the steering wheel, and that was such a novelty at the time. Here's the logic. The logic is that if it's on the back of the steering wheel and you're staring down the road, you don't have to look at the steering wheel to know what you're doing, because apparently in studies, this is the claim, mind you, I don't know if I believe it, but the claim is driving down the road, buttons on the front of the steering wheel, even if you know where it is, you know, just by rote, you're still going to look at the wheel. But if it's on the back of the steering wheel, you're less likely to take your eyes off the road to go find that button.
You're looking at it, yeah.
Yeah, because you can't crane around there to get the button. So you know, maybe it's just normal to me, but that's supposedly the logic.
You know what, that makes sense. You know what? I'm in. Put it on the back.
I don't know if I buy it, but that's why GM and Stellantis, those groups, put it back there supposedly. Now on this Uconnect 5 system, we do have, of course, the SRT pages that we saw before. If we go over here to dashboard, but we also have the performance pages where you can see your drag racing times, you can see your dyno, you can see extra gauges. That's kind of cool. Lots of different gauges actually, including the incoming coolant temperature, intercooler coolant temperature for the intercooled supercharger there, G-force gauges, vehicle dynamics.
1.1 Gs from accelerating.
It's absolutely insane metrics here on this vehicle.
What's the fastest 0 to 60 we have so far?
I think we scroll down to page 2. Fastest 0 to 60 so far today has been 4.2, but it has been raining. Since it was reset there. So, you know, definitely some insane numbers there. The rest of the software, it's basically the rest of Uconnect 5. So if you're a fan of it, then that's great. If you're not a fan of it, you know, there's not a lot of choice here in the Durango. Shiny black plastic. We've now had our Durango for over 10,000 miles. And I will say that this plastic surround is already showing some fine scratches on it. The buttons down here, where I was more concerned about the fine scratches, they've actually worn pretty well. So around the SRT and launch buttons, no scratching in ours, but scratches around the black plastic, around the instrument cluster where you're trying to wipe down the dust. Even though we're always trying to use soft microfiber cloths, etc. This is part of why I'm really not a fan of piano black in cars. does show those scratches.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. The piano black is a nightmare. It's a detailer's nightmare for sure. Because I mean, you could detail all the scratches out, but
It's detailer job security.
That's true.
All right, let's do launch control.
Oh my God.
But of course, don't speed.
Wow.
So, you know.
That was 35.
That's
Wow.
definitely impressive, especially for something that's, 6,000 pounds with us in it.
Yeah, it's honestly kind of shocking. I gotta catch my breath for a second.
You can almost feel the gas pump pulling up next to you for that, you know?
You hear the gas door opening. And the one thing I remember about your vehicle, and that's a lot less horsepower than this, but it's still a fast vehicle. It handles like it does not weigh 6,000 pounds.
That's true.
There's not a lot of body roll, and the same goes for this one. Even though this has much more engine, well, I guess not much more engine, but it has a supercharger slapped on
Yeah,
top.
I mean that's a lot more engine basically because you're forcing air in there. But yeah, it's pretty logical because I mean every aspect of the handling ability of this vehicle was really designed in the Mercedes era for Chrysler. And so this is, I mean, it's old enough that it dates back to then, but this is very closely related to the first generation Chrysler 300, Dodge Charger, that generation of Mercedes-Benz E-Class and the ML and the Grand Cherokee from that era, all common designed with the engineering team at Mercedes. And honestly, it shows. I mean, the first generation Durango was nothing like this. It was a body on frame Dakota style thing. This is a completely different animal. Basically, it was conceived of as a 3-row Grand Cherokee in origin. So unibody, rear wheel drive SUV, independent rear suspension. Very different than what all the other American manufacturers were doing at the time, thanks to that German connection. And I think it just really shows just in the bones. I mean, obviously Dodge has tuned it and changed it over time and made significant updates since that very first Durango, but I think that German DNA just shows.
Yeah, for sure. And we have adaptive dampers here on the Hellcat. And so I think that plays a major part into making it feel a lot lighter around corners than it really is. But it's just overall a good driving vehicle. Now, this Hellcat is a lot louder in the cabin than it is in the 392 or the SRT.
Definitely.
Yeah, the in-cabin drone from the exhaust is substantial.
We'll put it here in the sport mode. What I like about this also, while we're playing with the modes, is that you can also dive into the sport mode setup. And for instance, if I wanted track suspension, then I can do that. If I go over to, let's say, custom mode here, we can tweak all sorts of fun things. So let's have the transmission in track, paddles on, sure, why not? All-wheel drive. I kind of like the sport, which is more than 50% of power to the rear, but not 90, Stability, like it all on, because, 710 horsepower. We can do track and then track for suspension and steering. So there's a lot of adjustability in the setup there, which I do really enjoy.
It's fun to have things. Whether or not it does much, it's still fun to press buttons, and it's kind of the placebo effect, whether or not it actually does anything, which I think it definitely does, but it's nice to have some
the big
customizable
difference dynamically you'll notice, especially on like a gravel surface, you really will notice the all-wheel drive split. The TRX, the Hellcat all-wheel drives, and actually the SRT all-wheel drives as well. Now the Ram 1500 with the active torque split rear.
Yeah,
they all have like a version of this.
This suspension is a lot stiffer.
It's a lot stiffer.
Because I'm noticing I'm bouncing now.
Yeah, you definitely have that sort of bounce thing going on. But the all-wheel drives, they definitely have this set is really cool because they can permanently send X% of power to the rear. So you can have that solid rear power bias when you want to, but for like snow driving, you can basically command 50-50 without a full lock. Yeah. So you have that traction ability on snow if you want to as well.
That's nice. It gives this thing a versatile feel. So you can use it for going 0 to 60 really quick, or you can use it for times when you get snow at your place and need to go to the grocery store and you have to have that 50-50 or that all-wheel drive to get through it.
And what I appreciate, not Durango, mind you, but for anybody that's interested in a Ram, this all-wheel drive system essentially lives on in certain versions of the new Ram 1500 with that 3-liter inline-6 turbo and that variable torque split, which I think is really unique in the pickup truck segment, because not only do you have all-wheel drive capability in a truck where you don't have to worry about the selector, you have the ability to change that power bias around for sportier driving or for better traction, etc.
As you can hear, we're pulling away from a stoplight. You you really hit it.
Lots of supercharger.
Oh, it's so good. And it makes for a good meme, too. There's some good memes online.
Yes.
But people go into dealerships and I want the...
But that's why this is such a polarizing vehicle, and all the Hellcats have been, because I can see people that really don't want supercharger whine.
Yeah.
And that is a feature in this. It's not considered a bug. That is a solid feature set to the Hellcat faithful, that distinctive supercharger whine.
I mean, that whine right there is what people recognize a Hellcat by. That is like that whiny noise. You don't really get that in a whole lot of other vehicles. There is a pretty distinct whine in like the GT500s, the Ford Mustangs. Those have a distinct whine, but it's different than what we find here in any Mopar product. It's so distinct, whether it be a Challenger, a Charger, a Durango, or even a TRX.
Because this has a huge supercharger. It's not a little one. It's a really big one.
Yeah.
And also they tuned the intake to have that whine. And some manufacturers of superchargers, especially like GM, they've really tried to minimize the supercharger whine as much as possible. And here they were like, hey, it has a supercharger. Let's highlight that and just ramp it up.
Yeah, I think that's a huge plus for me.
And you know what? If you're young and you want the Hellcat fun, but you have kids or kids on the way, you know, I mean, there are 3 rows back there. Well, you know, 2 rows back there, 1 row up here.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, it's a good all-around vehicle. It's a good family hauler and get your kids to school on time hauler, and
you'll be the fastest or coolest fast dad at the daycare drop-off line.
This is a fun vehicle to drive, and I'm just honestly impressed how well it handles these tight corners like we're on right now. You do feel the weight. You do feel the weight on more of a hairpin style corner like that. But the body roll is fairly minimal. You feel it more so in the steering of like it not really wanting to turn. It's not rolling over, it's more pushing through the turn.
This is the kind of vehicle where you have to be prepared to dig a little deeper in the throttle, apply that power to the back, get the rear end to settle down and go around the corner, which of course it will, because there's so much power in its rear-wheel drive. It's always surprised me a bit that there's never been a competitor in this segment, even to the regular SRT, because the Explorer ST is not as fast as the Durango 6.4. And then here is that absolute bonkers next level. And even Mazda, with the CX-90 rear-wheel drive, they decided not to chase performance. And it's, you know, kind of very middle of the road as far as its performance numbers go. Now, there are some things to keep in mind, of course, because we have so much power and so much torque, and this is the heavy-dutyest version of the ZF 8-speed, shift quality is not going to be everybody's cup of tea. I mean, the shifts are very, very firm.
They are very firm. And, you know, I like that, but I'm also driving this car for a very short amount of time. If I had to live with this and I actually had to use it for useful purposes outside of accelerating, it would probably get a little bit obnoxious. That whine might get to me. The firm, crisp shifts might get to me. But you have the modes on there. You can turn that down a little bit and turn it to more of a...
We can put it in eco mode and see how you like the transmission shifts there.
Oh, already it's different. I mean, we just went from a track mode to a eco mode, and that it downshifted like 2 gears.
Yeah.
Or I guess upshifted 2 gears. And it's a lot more tame now. You still have that burble from that massive V8, but the transmission isn't as aggressive in upshifting and downshifting, which is nice that you have that variability.
One thing to keep in mind, though, I mean, even in eco mode, you're basically going to struggle to get double digits in your fuel economy. Expect your fuel economy averages to be, you know, somewhere around 10, most likely, especially if you're getting happy with the throttle. Maybe on a longer road trip, you could get up into the teens, you know, fairly easily. You know, out on the open highway, if you're gentle, 15, 16 miles per gallon is going to be okay. But, you know, it takes a lot of fuel to make 700 horsepower. And this is not an overly efficient engine design. If you want to get your hands on one of the last 710 horsepower Durangos, you need to act fast, because production, according to Dodge, is in fact finally ending. There will not be a 2026 Durango. I mean, at least we hope not, right?
I mean, how many times have they said that this is done? How many times have they said they're no longer making it? What, 2 years now? Or a year and a half? But
yeah, it has been a while.
Yeah, but we have yet another 2025 Durango Hellcat. But hey, luckily it's still here. Let's appreciate it while it still exists. And then it's going to be a relic. And then it's going to go up in value, and they're no longer made.
The last call. We promised this time, pinky swear.
Yeah, I swear I saw last call years ago.
Yeah, you know, that's not to say that there's anything wrong with the Durango. Again, you know, I own one myself, and maybe that's why I tend to be a little bit harder on it than some people. Maybe I just, you know, trying to compensate for perceived bias or something. But my Durango has been actually really well behaved. It tows incredibly well. That's an entire reason to get the Durango. It's definitely fun to drive. It feels very solid, very Germanic driving out on the road. I think the look actually is still pretty solid even after all these years. I do wish the interior was a bit more modern, but of course for this model, none of that really matters. What matters is what's going on under the hood. Is what's going on under the hood enough to compensate for the relative age of the rest of it though? What do you think, Nick? Would you, are you team yes or team no?
With you saying what's under the hood is really what counts, that's in my brain as well. I mean, you're not buying this technically for the styling, you're realistically buying it for the 710 horsepower, because where else can you find this? There's no longer a Trackhawk. You can't buy that. This is it. This is all you got. I mean, you could go and get an Aston Martin DBX 707.
It's not gonna have a third row.
It's not gonna have a third row, and it costs nearly 3 times what this does.
You could get like an X7 Alpina or a GLS AMG. But
I mean,
we're talking
the
double the
Alpina
price.
would be double the price of this. And
exactly.
You also would have to be afraid of, I mean, when you break an Alpina, do you take that to the BMW dealership? You take this to the Dodge dealership and they'll work on it willy-nilly. So,
yep. I mean, you know, breaking this, still gonna be expensive. But, you know, I will say, generally speaking, repairs and maintenance, it's above average, but you know, insurance on our SRT Durango, very oddly, this is a good one. I get asked this often. I checked, and insurance on our Durango SRT is only $10 a year more for me than a Honda Pilot. So,
interesting.
You know, like the repairs on this, the insurance, liability, etc. Liability is obviously going to depend on your driving record a little bit more, but the rest of the insurance profile is really not far off of the average 3-row SUV out there. Hellcat's obviously going to be a little bit crazier. So insuring something like that, Mercedes, that BMW, definitely is going to cost an awful lot more. And, you know, they still won't sound quite like this.
And just like we were talking about earlier, there is so many of this powertrain out there between Hellcat Chargers, Challengers, the Durangos, that it's not like it's a rare engine. It's not like a unique situation, although it is unique being in an SUV. There's a lot of Hellcats out there, and many people can work on those 6.2s. And they're fairly reliable from what I have seen from the past couple of years. People beat the crap out of these things, and they seem to handle it just fine. So I mean, you're gonna be putting a lot of gas in it, but that's about it.
Yep, so let us know what you guys think about that down there in the comment section below. And of course, check out our related content on the Durangos, the SXT base model. We have a video on that. We have videos on the 5.7, the 3.6, the 6.4, the 6.2, every Durango imaginable.
They have ran this platform to the ground.
So long. This is one of the oldest vehicles you can buy new on the road today. So let us know what you think about that down there in the comment section below. See everybody later.